Okay, good morning, Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome back. We're up to Shmuel Bay's Perek Vav. We took a 2-week hiatus to learn about Megillas Rus. So let's just review where we are up to. Perek Hay, chapter 5 in Shmuel Bay's. We learned that David HaMelech now is the king over the entire Klal Yisrael. And right after he became king, there were several attacks. This is not shocking. This is not new, but our enemies on all sides attacked us, and Baruch Hashem, we were successful in winning all of those battles. Baruch Hashem. Sorry, got the wrong sefer. Now, after that, we learn that David has a place to stay in Yerushalayim, which is called Ir David. We don't really know what that is, what exactly is going on there, but at least David now is like fortifying his place in Yerushalayim Ir Kodesh, which is setting things up. Secondly, what happened in Parakeh is that David reconquered Yerushalayim. David's clearly preparing that he knows he set his capital city as Hebron. And once he became king over all the Jewish people, that was not suffice anymore. And the capital, or the eternal capital city of the Jewish people, was and always will be Yerushalayim. So we discussed how he conquered that city. The Yevusim were left there. They did not leave when Yoshua conquered. So all those things happened in chapter 5. And everything now, I would say, is happening very progressively, one thing to the next, that David took over as king. Yerushalayim, enemies attack, and David is showing his might and his military prowess as well, which leads us into Perek Vav, which is, on one hand, very tragic, but also very exciting. Okay? And that is, David now sees that he wants to build the Beis HaMikdash. And in order to build the Beis HaMikdash, you have to get certain things in place. Number one, Yerushalayim needs to be in Jewish hands. Without that, nothing doing. So check. You can check that box. Now, what is left? So right now, the Jewish people have been functioning with a Mishkan. The Mishkan, it's a little bit unclear where the Mishkan is located right now. As we learned in the beginning of Sefer Shmuel, the Mishkan was destroyed. It was ransacked by the Plishtim. And as a result of that, the Aron Kodesh with the Luchos were taken. This is all the beginning prakim of Shmuel Aleph. After it was taken, it was stolen by the Plishtim. They had all these punishments happen to them in different cities. And eventually they returned the ark back to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people did not return the ark to the Beis HaMikdash, or to the Mishkan. And we don't know where the Mishkan was. Presumably it was functioning on some type of level somewhere, but it was lacking the Luchos. There was a fear, or maybe either there's a fear that it would be taken again, or this was like some type of divine punishment that the Jewish people did not deserve Luchos to be there. So David now, in preparation for getting the Beis HaMikdash to be built in Yerushalayim, needs to think, okay, what's my next step? David's next step is to take the Luchos from where they were. We learned this. They were in someone's home called Avinadav. Okay, we're going to learn it very, very shortly. And his plan is to bring the Luchos first to Yerushalayim, place them there in a temporary location, and then build the Beis HaMikdash almost like around this, and that he thought was very, very important to do immediately. Okay, Vayosef, and that's really where our perek, really begins. So sorry, I'll add that the psukim in Divrei Hayamim spell out a lot more details about what was happening during this time. We noted this again. This is almost a year and a half ago, that when the Mishkan was destroyed in Shiloh, that was never alluded to in the Navi. It was only alluded to in Divrei Hayamim. The Mishkan was rebuilt in Nov. Nov is a city of Kohanim. We know that because that city was destroyed and everyone was murdered in there. That was done by Shaul HaMelech along with Doeg HaEdomi. And from there, it was in Giv'on. Okay, those are the places that it was in. So now, what's going on next? Vayosef o David es kol b'chor Yisrael shloshim elef. David again assembles again, 30,000 additional men, young men of military age. For what purpose? And what does it mean? Ode. He did this again. Siper Kasav, says the Abarbanel, Sha'asav Ode David as Kol B'chor Yisrael. Rotza Lomar, Milvad Masha Asaf Osam the Melchames Plishtim, Ode Asaf Osam Lahalos Aron Elokim. He says one option here is that there is just a war between us and the Jewish people. Okay, us and the Jewish people. Hold on one second. There was a war in the last thing that we learned in Parakeh between the Plishtim and the Jewish people. He gathered people there, and then he gathered people again. And the juxtaposition is very significant. We don't only gather the military for military operations, but also almost like an honor guard, we are preparing the military for this very, very important situation. And that is as a result of what's happening here. Good. That is option number one in the Arabic. Now, Hine Asaf Lazaha Bachurim Lavad, Afi Shaloheya Inyan Milchama Lishtarech Ela Bachuri Korach. V'shechashav David Ulay Yavo Plishtim Yichus Aron Elokim. The Abarbanel suggests that maybe these people were not there to honor the Torah, to honor the Luchos, but he was afraid what's going to happen when the Jewish people are celebrating the Torah being brought to Yerushalayim, that our enemies are going to see that as a moment of weakness. So he needed extra soldiers that were there to protect us in our moment of weakness, in our moment of celebration. How many times, over and over again, have we seen our enemies wait for the Jewish holidays, wait for our moments of celebration in order to attack us? The Malbim writes here that it wasn't 30,000, it was really like 90,000. By Yosef Ode, he just added groups of 30,000s throughout to really, and this fits with the Abarbanel's approach, that they really needed a lot of people to really protect Klal Yisrael during this time, because he was very nervous about what can really happen when they brought the Aron to the Mikdash. Okay, the parak here is going to be done in two frames, and it's going to go back and forth a little bit. One frame is David preparing the nation in Yerushalayim, and the other is not David, but the Aron itself being brought up from where it is to Yerushalayim. Vayakam vayelech David v'chol am asher ito miba'ala Yehuda la'los misham es Aron Elokim. So David and all these troops, all these people went up from Yehuda. Okay, and where did they go? They got ready to bring the Aron Elokim to Yerushalayim. Alos misham Elokim asher nikra Shem Hashem tzvakos Yoshev Kruvim alav. They're not going to really be with the Aron, but they are getting ready for the excitement of the Aron that's going to be brought. And what is the Aron called? The Radak and many others point out here, the Aron is given a nickname, a unique name that it's not given anywhere else in the entire Tanakh, and that is Shem Hashem Tzvakos Yoshev HaKruvim Alav. The name Hashem, the God of the legions, whose Kruvim, rest on top of it. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? So the Radak here makes an enigmatic statement. The Radak says, oh, you know why it has like this interesting name? Zem mashalo niskar bechin b'makom acher. Lefi sheniskadi shemosh hakadosh baruch hu alav biyoso b'sadeh plishtim. Why is it called Yoshev Kurim Alav? Because it's when the Plishtim had it, there was a big Kiddush Hashem. The Plishtim stole the Aron, and the Aron itself was punished the people, the inhabitants of the city in which it was. So now it has like the shame. It's like almost like it has a personality to it, and it's strong and it's powerful. And this is a very, very powerful name. The Gemara in Baba Basra gives a different reason for this and really picks up on the shame. Why does it say shame twice? The Gemara says, you know why? Because there were two sets of luchos that were in the Aron. This is one of the proofs for this concept that maybe many of us are familiar with, is that the luchos, vishivre luchos, munachim ba'aron, this is Gemara Baba Basra, daf Yudal Beis, that the luchos that were not broken, right? The first luchos were broken on the 17th of Tammuz as a result of Chete Egel. The second set of luchos were pristine. They stayed in the same condition. There's a discussion about where the second luchos are located, and vis-a-vis the first ones. This Gemara writes, Shem Hashem Tzvakos means that the two sets of luchos were placed in the Aron. And the Gemara elsewhere writes, it's a very powerful message for everyone, is that even though the luchos themselves were physically broken, they still get the kavod as the luchos themselves. And the Gemara's example is that sometimes you see somebody, a zaken, an elderly person who is shachach tamudo, right, lived his life as a Torah giant, as a Torah leader, and unfortunately there are terrible diseases that we have that need to be fixed. We need, and they need cures, and they forget their Torah, or they're not the same person that they were back in the day. The Gemara says we give them and we afford them the same exact kavod as they were their entire lives. That's the Gemara's example. Luchos, the Shivrei Luchos, Munachim va'aron, both are placed in the Aron. Vayarkivu, so now what do? They placed the Aron, Haron Elokim, El Ha'agala Achadasha, Vayisa'uhu mi Beis Avinadav asher begiba, Uzo va'achyo b'nei Avinadav nohagim es Ha'agala Achadasha. Now we are introduced to two different people. We're introduced to Uza and Achyo. Uza and Achyo are going to be the two men in charge of bringing the Aron Elokim to Yerushalayim. That's number one. Number two, they take the Aron from Avinadav's home. Avinadav was he must have been, right, a very holy person. that he gets the Aron in his home. And again, nothing happened to the Aron all that time. And they led the Agala they're going to lead the Agala to Yerushalayim. The Agala is a wagon. So they placed the Aron on top of a wagon with the plan of bringing it to Yerushalayim.
Rabbi?
Any problems with what is happening right now?
Rabbi?
Yes.
I just, what hit me was it says that they put it on an Agala Chadasha, and that's what the police team did when they wanted to return the Aron Kodesh. They put it on an Agala Chadasha, and they had the cows that had never schlepped an Agala before. So it's just interesting that both the police team and Bnei Israel give the cover to the Aron about knowing that you can't put it on some used wagon. You have to do it on a new wagon.
Correct. So they're following what the Plishtim did. But nonetheless, is this the right thing to do? Actually, we're coming off of Parshas Bamidbar. In Parshas Bamidbar, we learn about the family of Levium that carried the Aron. It was Sheva Kahat, right? The family of Kahat, they carried the Aron. And the Torah clearly says, Bakasef Yisa'u. You cannot put an Aron on a wagon. It's not, even an Agala Chadasha. It's not appropriate. The Aron Elokim needs to be carried. And then many of you are going to ask, it needs to be carried. It's not carried. The Aron is no sayas, no sub, the Gemara said. Miraculously, it gives the impression that we carry it, but the MS, really, we don't carry it. It's carried by itself. But we need to give it the chashivas to carry it in some. So problem number one that arises here is that they are following what the Plishtim did, which Shiur said very astutely. But who says that's right? Who says that was right? Malbim says word for word. Cherkivu el Agala Chadasha vayisa'uhu. Tachash Torah tivsa, sheinase bekase. Instead of what the Torah says to do, the Torah says you got to carry it on your shoulders. Number one. Number two, which shevet gets to carry the Aron? The Levium. The Levium get to carry the Aron. We don't know. Maybe we can figure it out. That what Shvatim, Uz and Achio are from. It is very, very clear that Uz and Achio are not from Shevet Levi, nor are they Kohanim. They are what we call Zarim. They are foreigners to the Avoda of the Aron and Avoda in the Beis HaMikdash. So what they're doing right now is a double whammy. Two things that are very, very wrong. The Malbim spells this out, right? He writes, they carried it on their shoulders to the wagon. It should have been carried by Levium. That's the halacha. And not through foreigners. I mean, they were Jewish, but a Yisrael is called a Zar in vis-a-vis, in relative to the Levium. Im Aron Okim Ratzalomar, Shlo Nasu B'motos Kedino. They do not carry it on its poles. Rak Nasu Im Aron Atzmo She'achzu Bo. V'ayde Nisu Lo Ayde Motos Memsaim Beino V'nidehem Nagu Ba'aron Za'aser. We're going to see that this is setting them up for failure. That what they wanted to do is not going to happen at all. At all. Vayisa'u they brought it from Beis Aminadav, Asher B'Giva, Im Aron Kim, Va'achyo Holech Lifnei Ha'aron. So Uzzah is standing on the wagon with the Aron. Okay. And they don't have cows like the Plishtim did lead the Agalah. Okay. They knew better than that. What did they have? Uzzah himself, sorry, Achio was moving the wagon. You have Achio in front and Uzzah in the wagon itself with the Aron Elokim. Good. The David now flash to the other side. This is what they're bringing the Aron towards Yerushalayim. The David, the whole base Israel, Misachakim lifnei Hashem. David and all of the Jewish people, what are they doing? They are partying. Misachakim lifnei Hashem. B'chol atzei broshim u'kineros u'b'nivalim u'b'tupim u'b'na'anim u'b'tzaltzalim. There is an all-out party going on right now in Yerushalayim, and it is unbelievable. They are using all the instruments with the wild, right? Not inappropriate, but a party that is happening right now in Yerushalayim. Okay? Is that so wrong? Is it appropriate to party? This is a monumental, historic moment in Jewish history. Right now, this is one of those moments where there's like all over Israel, like you have that when you go to like these like historical sites, and you have like the same guy doing the video voiceover for like in English, where history meets destiny. You know, this is history meeting destiny. This is the history of the Jewish people, the luchos that carried the Jewish people through the Midbar, Matan Torah right here, and it's finally going to where it belongs, to Yerushalayim. This is a very big deal. It's a very, very big deal. And David v'chol Beis Yisrael are having a party. They're celebrating. But maybe it's too soon. Maybe it's too soon. Vayavou ad Gora Nachon. Now they flash back to the bringing the ark. Vayishlach Uzzah el Aron Elokim vayoches bo ki shamtu habakar. The oxen had stumbled. I guess he's carrying it with the oxen and everything else. I mean, the animals are there, but Uzzah's Achios leading them along. Uzzah's on the thing. He's on the wagon, and the animals stop short. What happens? The Aron starts to tilt. The Aron starts to tilt, and Uzzah grabs for the Aron. He grabs for the Aron. Vayichar af Hashem ba'Uzzah vayakeu sham Elokim al hashal. Vayama sham im Aron Elokim. As a result, Uzzah himself is struck by God, and Uzzah dies on the spots. Either because he physically touched the Aron, which is what we don't do. That's why we have poles. Cheskuni writes the reason they have poles in the Aron because touching the Aron itself is so spiritually and physically dangerous. Right? Even Steven Spielberg knew that when he made the movie. That's number one. Or it wasn't that he physically touched it, but the fact that he didn't believe that God would never let the Aron fall, just like we don't really carry the Aron, but we give the impression that we carry the Aron. So maybe that's what was faulty with what Uzzah did. Nonetheless, Uzzah dies on the spot right then with the Aron Elokim. With the Aron Elokim. Who's at fault here? After action report. Who is at fault? Vayichar lo David al asher parat Hashem parat be'Uzzah. God gets angry at David HaMelech. David HaMelech. He made a breach in Uzzah, and they named this place Peretz Uzzah. Ad hayom hazeh. Ad hayom hazeh. All this excitement, all this history meeting destiny of the Jewish people, it is struck down very, very quickly and swiftly. And we've already noted that there are several mistakes that led up to this Problem. Vayireh David et Hashem bayom hahu, vayomer eich yavo elai aron Elokim. Right? David was very afraid. Very, very afraid. And all he wanted to know was, Hashem, how can we ever bring the Aron? Let's take a step back and try to understand why this is happening. So, most clearly, right, they made a few different mistakes. The two most obvious ones are the ones that we mentioned. They made the mistake of bringing the Aron on a wagon. Number two is non-Levium or Kohanim were carrying the Aron. And that's what led to this mistake. But maybe it was more fundamental. Suggests Rav Bazak from the Gush. He suggests the following. He says that you have to look at this story in the bigger picture. In the bigger picture here is that sometimes we party when it's not appropriate to be partying. You know, to use an analogy from sports, sometimes you spike the ball in the end zone before you get to the end zone because you know you're going to get a touchdown. And then that becomes a big busha. David here, with all of his people, was so excited that they started partying and celebrating before anything happened in anticipation for it. That's great. And sometimes that is really awesome and the right thing to do, but not always. Sometimes it's more appropriate to celebrate after it already happened, right? And that's exactly what was wrong here. We are instructed, the gilu barada, we dance and tremble before Hashem. There needs to be a certain level of balance between the simcha and the yira, the love and the fear before Kadosh Baruch Hu. And it's not nothing in life is a given that just because we will and we want the Aron to come to Jerusalem does not mean that that's going to happen. And we need to daven and prepare ourselves with the right amount of koved rosh, right? The right level of seriousness before Kadosh Baruch Hu, before we even consider that to happen. And Rabbi Zak suggests that's what was wrong here. There's a preemptive celebration. To celebrate after the Aron's already placed in the Aron, unbelievable. That's great. But celebration in the middle, or even before anything really happens, that's what we call, too much. I'm going to call it arrogance here, but it's a little bit dangerous. A little bit dangerous, right? And that's why David responds with Yira, Vayira David. David, now, this is not a midah that we expected David HaMelech. David HaMelech we know as the one that is the dancer. He's the emotional guy, right? He is emphatically in love with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. But David's reaction is spot on. It didn't need to happen this way. And sometimes, Rabbi Zak suggests, that we too much focus on the love, then we can make mistakes. And sometimes mistakes that are so obvious when you look back at the after action report. And the two mistakes that were so obvious were, it's a pasuk in the Torah that says the Levian carried the Aron. The pasuk in the Torah that says you carry it on your shoulders with the poles. You don't do this on a wagon. It doesn't work out that way. Well, we're so excited for something, sometimes mistakes are going to happen. And that's what is so dangerous here. Shiur, you have a question?
Yeah, two things. One, in terms of Uzzah, part of me wants to say, give the guy a break. He was worried something would happen to the Aron Kodesh when the animal stumbled. So if Itaka reached out to try to, hold on to the Aron, his heart was in the right place. The other thing is, who made the decision that Uzzah and Achio were the ones that should take it? if they weren't Levim, who was supposed to know that it should only be the Levim and that from Avinadav's house?
Right. I don't
It's-
disagree. Yeah, I don't disagree with your point. Sometimes the people that die as a result of mistakes are not the people that are the ones in charge. And here, facing the kedusha of the arum, which is like in some ways very easy to understand and in some ways very difficult on the personal level to really understand and appreciate, that maybe like this is just the reality that the person that's going to touch it is going to no longer be living, period. But I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. What was your second point?
I was just wondering who designated, like, if it was a known thing that only Levim should be handling the Aron Kodesh,
Yeah,
gave the heter to the guys to take it themselves, and their father said, "Here, take it, put it in Agala, and take it back."
correct. It's not clear. It's probably David was involved at some level. And we're going to see, we're not going to get to that today, but we're going to see David's reaction to this. But what is most appropriate is this perek that we're learning right now is a Haftorah. Can anyone guess, based on the themes that we just discussed, which parsha in the Torah, right, does this sound most similar to, and is the Haftorah for? On the day of utter joy and excitement. Nadav ve'avihu. This is the Haftorah of Parsha Shemini, right? The beginning of Perek Vav, actually through Perek Zayin. And it's a very similar story. People doing things that are a little bit above and beyond the rules. They're doing it according to the Ramban for the right reasons. They want to bring a special korban. But sometimes, just because the ahava is there in your heart, is in the right place, doesn't mean that that's allowed. Doesn't mean that's permitted. Our life, in general, and our Jewish life especially, is a balance between the ahava and the yira, right? The both of those need to always be balanced out. Some people, like Nadav were kulo ahava, kulo, and there needs to be some boundaries with that. It can't just be, untethered, unbridled ahava through and through. We need a certain level of yira as well. Okay, I think it's a very, very important lesson in general for all of us, but especially here. We're going to continue and discuss David's reaction to this, and if and when the Aron eventually makes it to Yerushalayim. That's right. I wish everybody a wonderful day.
Thank you.